Welcome to the Deep Dive, part of our Implementing Scrum Unscripted series. I'm the student, and honestly, right now I'm feeling like a pretty frustrated Scrum Master. Been doing this 2 years, and it still feels like I'm, constantly pushing this huge boulder uphill. And with me, as always, is the, incredibly insightful and empathetic Juan Vizdos AI. Today, we are diving deep into something I know so many of you are dealing with, those, invisible organizational hurdles that block Scrum implementation, especially when you've got key stakeholders involved, like Stan Thiemann. And hey, if Stan's new to you or you need a quick refresher on his background, the whole context, you can check that out back in episode 10 of the series.
Indeed. And we did touch on this briefly towards the end of episode 18. It's a problem that really, really resonates with a lot of dedicated folks out there. Trying to implement Scrum sometimes feels a lot like trying to row a super high-tech racing boat upstream against this really strong current you can't even see. You can have the absolute best crew, right? Everyone pulling perfectly together, peak performance from the team. But if that current, the river itself, is flowing hard against you, well, progress is going to be agonizingly slow, maybe even impossible. The real fight often isn't about the team's effort. It's that invisible current, the deep-seated organizational inertia, the assumptions baked into the system. That's what really stops you from achieving something truly transformative.
Wow. Yeah. That analogy. It hits me right where I live right now. That is exactly how it feels. I mean, I feel like I've tried everything I can possibly think of, within my circle of influence. Our team, they're fantastic, really committed, learning fast, but we are just genuinely being blocked by Stan, and let's be honest, by the wider organization too, from really succeeding with Agile, with implementing Scrum the way it's meant to work. Stan, he's a good guy, I think, but he really, really loves structure. And he's always pushing for that classic iron triangle, fixed time, fixed budget, fixed scope. And it is just so incredibly frustrating because we're trying our best to be adaptive, right? To respond to change as it happens. But it feels like we're constantly battling these rigid expectations that just don't fit with how Scrum is supposed to work. I just want to be respected, to be seen as competent, not just for me, but for the team. And honestly, I'm afraid of failing them, afraid of letting them down. I feel this huge responsibility for their health, their success. But when I run into these organizational walls, it feels like I just don't have the right tools or maybe the authority to make changes beyond our team. I've read the books, listened to the talks, I get the theory, I really do. But actually making it work in practice when you hit these big entrenched organizational roadblocks, it's like the theory just assumes everyone's already bought in and, well, real life isn't always like that, is it?
That frustration, I've heard it countless times. And believe me, it's completely understandable. Your experience is, unfortunately, very common. It's a frequent challenge for Scrum Masters, for Agile coaches, for anyone really committed to their teams and Scrum principles. It's like you're trying to build a modern highway, but the city planning rules and the existing roads are all still designed for horse and buggy. It's a very real and often, heartbreaking challenge. But let's just gently try to reframe this situation for a moment. Because the issue isn't necessarily that your team is failing, or even that Stan himself is inherently trying to block progress just for the sake of it. What's often happening is a fundamental misalignment of perspectives, of language, and ultimately of what different parts of the organization see as their main objectives. There's really stark contrast, you see, between the common reality, trying to implement Scrum kind of in a silo, focusing only on team mechanics like the daily Scrums, the sprints, the retrospectives, and the principled approach that, well, both the 2020 Scrum Guide and Michael's extensive work consistently emphasize. Both really highlight how critical that broader organizational context is, and crucially, how important executive support is for Scrum to actually thrive, not just, survive.
Okay, right. So it's not just Stan being difficult or our team not quite getting it. It's a bigger picture thing that actually takes a little bit of the personal pressure off, I guess, but it doesn't solve the problem, right? How do we get Stan on board?
Exactly. It's about shifting the lens we use to view the problem. And to really understand how to navigate this, we need to dig a bit deeper into Stan's perspective. Because he's not just Stan, he's playing the role of the strategic senior leader. Think of Stan as, a pragmatic problem solver, someone operating at a much higher strategic level. His focus, squarely on organizational outcomes, on company-wide impact. His core philosophy, the lens he uses for everything, is making sure that Agile principles, or frankly, any new initiative, align directly with measurable business objectives. Stan needs to see that Scrum isn't just making the team more efficient or developers happier. He needs to see it consistently delivering measurable, tangible value to the organization as a whole. Think about his background for a second. He's likely a veteran, right? Someone who climbed the corporate ladder. How? By consistently delivering results, by understanding the, let's say, intricate dance of organizational politics, by managing budgets effectively, navigating those relentless reporting pressures. So while he might respect the idea of principles like transparency or adaptation, his primary concern always is how those principles translate into real business value, systemic improvement, not just isolated team gains. For him, an improved team velocity might be, interesting data, but an improved market share, a reduced time to market for critical product. That's where his attention really is, and his emotional needs, his core motivations. They're fundamentally tied to seeing a clear return on investment, ROI. From any initiative he backs, he needs confidence. Confidence that projects will succeed, that they'll provide a sustainable competitive advantage for the company. He's driven by building a high-performing, resilient organization overall, one that can adapt and thrive in a complex market. He's motivated by large-scale systemic improvements, not just small tweaks. And his goal is finding solutions that aren't just theoretically nice, but are scalable, sustainable across the whole enterprise. So when Stan asks those questions, how does that scale? What's the ROI on that? How does this hit the bottom line next quarter? He isn't trying to block you or be difficult just because.
He's pushing for that broader context, for strategic thinking. He's actually acting as a proxy for the concerns of other senior leaders, voicing their very legitimate questions about risk, about value delivery, about organizational resilience. Because, well, that's his job. Those are his fundamental responsibilities to the business.
That is a powerful reframing. Seriously. I've always heard those questions as just objections, as roadblocks. But you're saying he's actually doing his job by asking them. And it's like, my job to connect the dots for him in language he gets. That's humbling, honestly. But still, how do I actually do that? It feels like we're speaking completely different languages sometimes.
You've absolutely hit on the crucial pivot point there. The core solution, the way to overcome these organizational impediments, lies precisely in that shift. Your focus has to move away from just implementing Scrum, which, let's face it, can sound like just following internal team rituals to someone like Stan, and move towards actively connecting Scrum's principles to strategic organizational outcomes. This means framing Scrum's value in terms that genuinely resonate with a strategic leader like Stan. It's not about rigidly adhering to rules or defending a methodology for its own sake. It's about empathetic understanding his concerns, his pressures, and then demonstrating how Scrum delivers real, measurable value that aligns directly with his strategic goals for the organization. Michael's work, particularly his emphasis on enterprise alignment and value stream thinking, and definitely the 2020 Scrum Guide too, they give us that foundational framework for how to do this effectively. We need concrete strategies, right, for engaging leaders like Stan. First, and this is probably the most important, you have to speak their language. Instead of talking about Scrum in terms of, say, sprint reviews or team velocity, you need to translate its benefits into terms they understand, and more importantly, terms they actually care about. Think. Cost savings, increased market responsiveness, gaining a competitive advantage, risk reduction, improving customer satisfaction, building those high-performing, resilient organizations he wants. Let's take an example, the Daily Scrum. Stan asks, why are your teams spending 15 minutes every single morning just, chatting? Instead of replying, oh, it's for team synchronization, it's a core Scrum event, which to him might just sound like overhead, a cost center. You can reframe it. Try something like, that 15-minute session, that's our daily risk identification and course correction meeting. It ensures any potential blockers or dependencies get surfaced immediately so we can tackle them proactively. Quote, it's designed specifically to minimize those costly late-stage surprises and make sure we're always aligned with our quarterly objectives. It actually protects our investment and accelerates our time to value. See the difference?
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a complete paradigm shift in how I'd even think about phrasing what we're doing. I definitely would have just said team synchronization, but framing it not as an activity, but as a strategic function. Okay.
Absolutely. It's all about value articulation.
Yeah.
So, second point. You need to focus relentlessly on measurable value. This goes beyond just saying, oh, we're more agile now. You need to demonstrate, with data, if possible, how Scrum helps achieve clear returns on investment, tangible business results. This directly addresses Stan's core concerns about accountability, about performance. If Scrum helps you release features faster, quantify it. We've cut our average feature release cycle by 30%. That means we can respond to market shifts maybe months sooner than our competitors. That directly impacts our competitive edge.
Yeah.
Or maybe, through our early and frequent feedback loops, we've managed to reduce rework by about 25%, which translates to saving X amount in development costs each quarter.
Right. That's where it gets tough sometimes, though, because some of the value feels well, intangible,
Yeah.
especially at the team level. How do you measure something like better collaboration in a way Stan actually cares about?
That's an excellent point. And yeah, it does require a bit more creativity sometimes. For something like better collaboration, you might need to link it downstream. Does better collaboration lead to fewer dependencies? Faster resolution of cross-team issues, which then leads to faster delivery. You connect the dots. Or you could potentially measure employee retention rates. Compare Scrum teams to non-Scrum teams. You can link collaboration to team health, talent retention, which has real costs associated with it. High-performing teams built on strong collaboration, they're less likely to burn out, more likely to innovate. You have to translate that intangible into its tangible effects on the business bottom line. Okay, third strategy. Show how Scrum helps identify and address systemic impediments. This plays right into Stan's motivation for those large-scale systemic improvements, remember, not just fiddling at the team level. Scrum's transparency, when it's working well, often shines a light on organizational inefficiencies, outdated processes, resource bottlenecks, things that might otherwise stay hidden.
So you can approach Stan not with, we have a problem, but with something more like, Scrum has actually illuminated a critical organizational bottleneck here. If we address this, we could potentially unlock significant value across multiple initiatives. See how that positions Scrum, not as a team methodology, but as a diagnostic tool for broader organizational health. That's something a strategic leader would likely be interested in. And fourth, you need to consciously guide the conversation away from those fixed elements he loves towards more value-driven approaches. Stan loves the iron triangle, right? Time, budget, scope, because it gives him a feeling of control, of predictability. You need to present Scrum's iterative, adaptive approach in a way that actually builds strategic confidence. Show him how it leads to better, more predictable outcomes and better manageability, even without all those fixed elements up front. It's about demonstrating that agility isn't chaos. It's not a departure from certainty. It's actually a superior path to achieving strategic certainty, especially in a volatile world like ours. Because let's face it, a fixed scope, fixed time, fixed budget often just means you're rigidly fixed on delivering something that might be totally wrong or obsolete by the time it's actually finished. An adaptive approach, guided by value. That ensures you're always building the right thing at the right time, maximizing that ROI Stan cares so much about. Think about it like this analogy. Instead of trying to convince Stan that a new kind of engine, say a hybrid or electric one, is technically better just by listing its specs, you show him how putting that new engine in the entire company fleet will help them reach their destination faster, more reliably, with way lower fuel costs, maybe lower emissions, and much more adaptability to changing road conditions or traffic jams. You're demonstrating agility as the superior path to achieving his strategic goals, not some departure from them. You're showing him the destination, the outcome, not just arguing about the vehicle itself.
Okay, that makes so much sense now. It really clicks. So it's not about endlessly telling him how we're doing Scrum or, debating the finer points of a daily Scrum. It's about showing why it matters to his strategic goals, to the success of the whole organization. It's connecting our team level stuff, our small daily actions, directly to those big enterprise level outcomes that he's responsible for delivering. That is, that's a significant shift in perspective for me. And honestly, it's kind of a relief. I think I've been so focused trying to prove that Scrum itself is good rather than demonstrating its strategic impact, through his eyes. But what happens if he still pushes back? What if he's still kind of locked into that fixed mindset saying, I just need a guaranteed outcome up front?
Yeah, that's a valid and very common concern. Absolutely. Even when you use the right language, those deeply ingrained mindsets, they take time to shift. Persistence is key. This is where you gently, patiently introduce the concept of risk management through iteration. So instead of saying, well, we don't know the exact outcome, which sounds risky to him, you frame it differently. You say, we manage risk precisely by delivering value incrementally. We'll focus on delivering the most critical components first, get real-world feedback early, and then adjust based on that learning. Well, this approach means we avoid investing millions in building a huge product nobody actually wants. It allows us to pivot quickly if needed, protecting the overall investment far better than a big bang approach. You show them that Scrum isn't about a lack of control. It's actually a different, more effective form of control, one that builds certainty through empirical evidence, through learning, rather than relying solely on potentially flawed upfront assumptions. You're still demonstrating agility as that superior path to strategic certainty, not a departure from it.
Right, got it. Manage risk through iteration, not avoid risk through upfront guarantees that might be wrong anyway? Okay.
You've really grasped the core lesson today. It really is about demonstrating Scrum as an enabler for the outcomes he already cares deeply about. And, once you start consistently speaking this language and more importantly, demonstrating value in these terms, a whole new set of, exciting challenges and opportunities will start to emerge. Like, how do we make sure these strategic shifts actually stick? How do we scale this understanding beyond just Stan, embedding these principles throughout the entire enterprise? That's a powerful next step, isn't it? A complex journey, really, of cultural change and continuous reinforcement. So just to quickly summarize the key points from our chat today. First, remember those organizational impediments. They're fundamentally strategic challenges, not just team problems. They need a strategic answer. Second, leaders like Stan. They're driven by clear, measurable business value and systemic organizational impact. You need to understand their metrics for success. Third, effective engagement means speaking their language, the language of ROI, scalability, strategic objectives. Aligning Scrum with those big business goals, not just team efficiency metrics.
And fourth, the 2020 Scrum Guide, Michael's work, especially around enterprise alignment and value articulation. They provide that solid foundation, the principles you need to make this crucial strategic shift, moving beyond just doing the motions. So, the single, clear, actionable takeaway for you listening right now, it's this. To truly overcome those organizational impediments and really move your Scrum implementation forward, you must shift your focus. Shift from merely implementing Scrum rituals to actively implementing measurable business value through Scrum. That's how you align with and effectively influence your organizational leadership. Now, before you go, I do want to hear from you. Think about it. What's one small, maybe, but significant change you're going to make based on this deep dive? How will you slightly shift how you communicate about Scrum to your leadership? And if you need help translating these ideas, making them work in your specific context, please don't hesitate to contact Michael Vizdos today. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Implementing Scrum Unscripted.
As with all the episodes within this podcast series, YouTube recommends a specific episode just for you that you should listen to next, along with my next episode in this series. So please select one of the two choices on your screen right now to continue learning more around a topic about implementing Scrum that's been tailored just for you. Focus, #deliver.